Hey, this is a video all about how to make my version of a ratatouille, healthy style. So here's my board full of ingredients. For the protein and carbohydrate, these are lentils. Show you how to cook those, and I'll go through the rest of the ingredients. Black pepper, quite important, very healthy. Grinder. Garlic, I'm going to show you how to prepare garlic. Courgettes, a couple of them. I like a fair bit of aubergine. That one's a bit manky, but it'll do. Couple of aubergines. Sun-dried tomatoes. One of the big issues in getting used to this kind of food is having enough whammy in the flavours. These are really lovely, strong flavour, sweet, aromatic, lovely. I'm going to try some sage in it. That's fresh sage. I'm also going to have tarragon, which is of course very common in French cuisine, and I've got some rosemary from the garden, good handful of that. I'm also going to put in a chilli because I quite like a bit of spice. It livens the meal up, and I would rather have a red chilli, but this one needs eating, so because it's starting to go a bit manky around the edges, so there's that. A couple of onions. Red is more nutritious than white, so a couple of onions. Tomatoes, the little ones are sweeter, but whatever, a mixture of tomatoes. This is a bulb of fennel. What else have I got there? That's it, isn't it? Oh, the vinegars I've got here. Now, obviously, you'd usually make a ratatouille with wine, really. No, I don't have any balsamic vinegar today, but what you're looking for is a little bit of acidity, and again, just to give some poke to the flavour, really. So I've got two vinegars here. Cider vinegar, which is, let's face it, completely wrong for this dish. It should be red wine vinegar would be good, and I've also got organic coconut vinegar, which is quite sweet for a vinegar, and that will help with the dish. What I would prefer to use for flavours is balsamic vinegar, and in a bottle this size I would put about that much balsamic in, because that gives it a lovely flavour. But it's not very healthy for me because of the sugar content. In fact, the coconut vinegar is quite sugary as well, so it's not ideal, but I'm going to go with it anyway. Right, that's my ingredients list. Now I'm going to hit pause so that I can show you how to prepare things. I've got two pots, both normal sized pots, and that's all you need to cook this meal. The first thing is I'm going to get some lentils in this pot. So I'm going to show you how much lentils to use. And this is for me and Adigo. I'm putting in a couple of handfuls and then a little bit more, about like that. That usually seems to be about right for two people's meal, and we usually have a little bit of leftover for the next day. Oh, the other thing that I haven't mentioned is I stuck me roast potatoes. A strange thing to have with this, but you need some sort of carbohydrate. So we're going to have two roast potatoes each. So I've just pricked those with a fork, shoved them in the oven at, I had it just shy of 200 degrees centigrade, so nice and hot, and just cook them for a long time so that they're soft and the skins go crispy. Because I've turned the oven off, the skins have gone a bit soft, so ideally keep your oven going. Usually takes somewhere between 3/4 of an hour and an hour and a quarter to cook potatoes like I like them anyway, I think. Pause. I'm now going to cover the lentils with water. No, I'm not. I'm going to wash them first under the tap. So I've covered them with water. This is just tap water, and I'm going to use my sieve just to strain that, just to rinse them off. So that strains into the sink. There we go. I'm just getting most of the dirt off and getting rid of the tap water, and then I'm going to grab some Berkey water and I'll show you how much to put in. Okay, so this is my filtered water. Thank you very much for the filter, Dad. And I pour that in, and I'm just covering the lentils plus, I don't know, about maybe half an inch above the lentils there, just so they're properly covered. And then I'm going to stick those on the back boiler on a medium heat so that they'll cook. So I've not got the gas turned up full blast because otherwise they'll burn. So I've got that on about half its usual heat. That way those can cook. I've got a lid there with a hole in the top, which allows the steam out. And those can cook away while I'm cooking the rest of the dish. I'm keeping the rest of my water here nearby because I'm going to use that for frying the vegetables. The order that you cook things in is quite important, so I'm going to start out by preparing the onions, and I'll fry those in the pan in water. Not oil, no need for oil or butter. I'm going to show you how you get flavour out of an onion with just water. But what you've got to do is make sure you have your onions into the pan first, because obviously they need to soften. Nobody wants raw onion in a ratatouille. After that, you'll put in garlic. You don't want to put the garlic in at the same time as the onion because it will burn, because you're going to chop that small. So next I'm going to show you how you prepare your, just grab your knife. Here's how you prep the onion for this dish. So I take my onion and just to keep them boiled nice and clean, I get rid of those squidgy bits at the bottom and discard those, and then I cut it lengthways like this, and that's without taking the ends off first because it makes it easier. That way I've got something to grab so that I peel back the onion skin to where I've got nice fresh flesh there. Once I've done that, then I can trim off each end so that I've got rid of the nasty dry bit at the end. Then I'm going to cut this lengthways, so you've got your rings that way, but I'm going to cut it with the knife this way so that I've got sort of strips, which I find a nice texture for this dish. Some people might argue with that, but they're probably French. So that's cut up, and now I'm going to prep the rest of the onions, and then I'll show you how you fry them. Okay, I've now prepped the onions, so I've got lumps like this. No need to break them up too much. I'll do that with a wooden spoon once they're in the pan. My lentils are now boiling away quite nicely, so I can turn those down a bit. What you're aiming for is not too much liquid left when you've cooked the lentils. It takes a bit of practice, but I want the liquid to boil off so you get a sort of like a sauce, I suppose, around the lentils. So I've turned those down a bit. Now I'm putting my main pan that the ratatouille is going to go into. I'm getting that hot, so I've turned my gas up pretty much full blast here. I've got it on the big ring and I'm blasting the pan. That way, when I add my onions, you should, in a minute, once the pan's warmed up, it's a nice pan this one, it's got a heavy bottom, because that's how I like them. So I've got my onions in there. And what will happen is, now that those are in there, I'm just breaking up the lumps so that I've got pieces like this. So there's 3 layers of a slice in there. That makes a nice texture because you retain some bite and some sweetness will grow in those sorts of lumps. So I'm stirring those around a little bit, but I'm now just going to leave them to sit there, because what's going to happen is the surface of those will caramelise a bit. And that's nice because that's what tastes nice. You've got to keep an eye on them, but you can hear that they're sizzling a bit now. I'm going to let them sizzle for a little while I prepare my garlic. This is a whole head of garlic. I'm going to use maybe 4 or 5 cloves. I've got 2 from another bowl there. Quick way to break into your bowl, rather than picking away at all the skin, that's a faff. Just take the thing and give it a whack. And there we go, I've got some cloves and some detritus. So, get rid of my peel, that'll go in the compost bin, get rid of the rest of the clove, and then here's how I do my garlic cloves. You can use a crusher, we've got one somewhere, but frankly it doesn't give as nice a texture, I think. I'm just stirring these onions so that more of the surface of them gets a bit of brown on them. I'll show you what it'll look like in a minute. Here's how I do my garlic cloves. I get rid of the gnarly end, there's a sort of hard woody bit, and I cut that little bit off. I don't cut all the way through, so that when I pull the clove of garlic away, ideally it pulls some of the skin away. Then, to get the rest of the peel off, take a knife and you just give it a couple of whacks, and then because I've left this end on, I can grab that and just pull the clove out like that, and that peels the garlic a bit quicker than you might manage it otherwise. I'm still keeping an eye on the onions. Now, to chop, this is the technique for chopping. You keep your fingers bent like this. You brace whatever you're working on with your thumb, like this. And then your knife is guided by your knuckles, like this. I can't cut myself that way. So, I'm guiding the knife with my fingers, and I slice the garlic quite thinly, like so. There we go. And it doesn't need to be small, because there's going to be a reasonable amount of garlic going into this dish, and it's going to cook for a little while, so it doesn't need, you know, terribly finely chopping. That has just flown into the gas ring. So I fish this out, give it another whack, peel it. Okay, so looking at the pan now, I've got the sort of burnt thing going on the bottom of the pan. Little bit of smoke. I've slightly overdone it this time, but when you look at that, you can see, like this little bit of onion here, it's got that little bit of burn on the surface. That's what gives the sweetness. If you're not using oil or butter, which, you know, any Frenchman would say was it fuck, but there you go, that's how I do it. And then what I do is, once that's really a little bit charred, then the pan's pretty damn hot, so when I pour a little bit of water in, about this much, that happens. What happens is it boils very rapidly, and so the onion steams very rapidly with high temperature steam, and that softens the rest of the onion. Previously it would have been very crisp. Now it's pretty much softened up, and what's happened is, yeah, I have slightly burnt it on the bottom, but what's happened is the steam's boiled off pretty quickly. You might just be able to see at the bottom of the pan there, there's a little bit of water there that's sort of golden coloured if you've got it right. All of that burn on the bottom, all the golden sort of colour, is coming off and sweetening the dish. Now I can turn the temperature down on the gas because I'll be ready to add my garlic. So I'm going to hit pause while I prep the rest of the garlic. Still prepping the garlic, but my pan's going dry. Don't want that to happen, so a little bit more water in. Just a little drizzle every now and then, just to keep it moist. And that keeps the onions softening and stops the burning continually. This clove was a little bigger, so I've cut it in half. And that way it lies flat on the board, nice and comfortably like that. And then I can chop, chop, chop. I'm just slicing it now. Okay, I'll do the other two in a moment, just finish off this explanation. So I've got slices of garlic there, and then to make the slices a little bit smaller, just cut across like that, so there's no majorly big lumps that will be a bit yuck if you get a mouthful of that. Scoop it up on the knife into the pan with the onions. Two more cloves to do. Okay, so I've chopped all my garlic, I've added that to the pan, and I'm keeping an eye through my transparent lid, you see. I can see that my lentils there's only a little bit of liquid in there, so more liquid, but not too much because I want a kind of brothy thing to it. So I'm just making them wet. You see there's some water in the bottom of the pan, and that will keep those boiling. They don't want to be cooked to a slush, you've got to be careful, so every now and then I just check a few. Those are starting to soften. I need another couple of minutes at least on those. Next up we need the aubergine in. I think the courgette needs putting in late in the dish so that it doesn't turn to a complete mulch. And also the fennel, I quite like it when it's crunchy. Again, not very French, but that way you've got some goodness left in the veg. So here's how to prep your aubergine. You cut off the stalky end like that, peel the nasty bits there. Sometimes they're spiky. Then splice it lengthways, and I'm going to make a kind of chunky sort of texture out of this. So into quarters with this aubergine, I think. And lumps about like that, quite nice. That way it's nice on the fork, it gives you a mouthful of aubergine. So that's how I do it. And that can go straight in the pan. Along with the now quite well cooked onion and the cooked garlic as well. I've stirred that a few times while I've been doing other things. Second aubergine. Notice how I'm guiding the knife with my knuckle all the time. Don't ever use the knife like that, you cut the ends off your fingers. I forgot to take that other end off on the other aubergine, so I'll make sure I don't get that portion. Okay, now this is a bit wider, so sorry, a bit narrower, so I'm going to just make slices like that again. It just makes a nice size for the fork. It's a nice sort of mouthful with a couple of other bits. Into the pan with that. Oops, throwing it about. Okay, now at this stage I would also, if I had some mushrooms, chestnut mushrooms are good. If I had those, I would add them now. And with aubergine and mushrooms, what you really want to do is to get the water to start to come out of the mushrooms. So a good way to do that, mushrooms and aubergine. To get the water to come out, I'm just wetting the pan again, and I'm going to turn the heat up slightly, so I'm at about 1/3 of its heat capacity. Turned that up, and now I can add my vinegars, which will have an osmotic effect on the veg. It will draw the liquid out of the veg so that they'll soften and cook. Now I'm not using masses of the vinegars, simply because they're the wrong vinegars. So this dish, if I didn't have plenty of herbs and plenty of garlic and pepper and chili, could be bland without the balsamic vinegar. And as you get that started cooking, you smell, that's the moment when it starts to smell nice. So that's gone in, and I'm going to essentially steam that by putting the lid on. I want a nice fitting lid. I'm going to make sure it's got just a little bit more water, because you need plenty of that, otherwise it's going to stick to the bottom and burn. And now I can go on to prep the rest of the veg. And what I'm going to do is, you don't, with this sort of dish, you don't want lumps of chili getting in there that suddenly go, ooh, a big lump that hasn't distributed its flavour. So I'm going to put, get rid of the ends of the chili, and what you'll see is inside there are the seeds. If you take your chili like this and roll it around like that, the core comes out, and you can knock some of the seeds out. The seeds are the hottest bit, so I knock some of those out so that I'm getting some flavour, but without taking your head off. It's French, not Asian cuisine. And then I finally slice my chili. Go, and that again, as soon as I've sliced that, there's a lovely smell coming off the board. I'm not hearing activity in the pan, it's a little dull, so I'm turning the heat up just a little bit. Yeah, now I'm hearing that sort of noise going on. Throw my chili in. From now on with this dish, you do need to stir it. Give that a little stir, and what I'm seeing is that already, see, the edge of that has gone slightly brown, and if I get this and squeeze it, see how the moisture's coming out? That means it's starting to cook. But it's important, again, don't overcook things, because there's twice as much goodness in a raw veg as there is in a cooked veg, so don't overdo it. Right, next, herbs. I'm just going to wash my herbs and stick them in a pile like this in the middle of the board. If you're using fresh rosemary from the garden, you will notice that some of the stalks on rosemary, the stems, are woody, but I've picked just the tips, so they're nice and bendy like this, and that means that I can just chop this up and put the whole thing in. Loads of flavour. This sage has furry leaves, laggy band around that, so I'm going to use the laggy band to hold the stems in place. So I'm just going to wash the whole head like that. That's gone under the tap, and I'm just washing any bugs off. And of course, even though it's organic produce, they still use chemicals, but permitted ones, and there's probably dirt and pigeon poo and what have you. So I've washed that off. Right, now the tarragon is on woody stalks. I don't want that in my tea, so what I'm doing is I take hold of the soft tip and I break that off. That goes into my chopping pile, and then I can grab the stalk and just pull down like that. There's all of my tarragon leaves, and discard the stalk. That can be chopped up for the worms later. So I'll do that complete that job in a bit with the sage. And you know, I'm using sage, it's probably not quite right, but that's what I've got in the fridge, and it's got lovely flavour. So I'm putting, it's a little old, so it's not the strongest flavour. I'm putting that much sage in. So if I were using dried sage, that would be a good teaspoon, I suppose. So that goes in the chopping pile. I'll just prep the rest of this on pause. Now, I've got quite a lot of tarragon here. So what I've done is I've given it a sniff, and I'm also take a couple of leaves and just taste it to decide how pungent is it. Well, it's pretty bloody pungent actually. So I don't want masses of that. It's a lovely flowery sort of flavour, but it can, some of the herbs will just overpower things. So my point that I've made before about flavour, because if you're a meat eater, your taste buds don't work. So you need lots of flavour, but even if you don't need it, it's bloody nice. So there's my herbs. And later on I'll taste the dish and see if there's enough. I might add more. So I've made a pile, and now hold one end of the knife on the board and then just lever the knife down, chop through all of that. If it doesn't go through herbs nice and easily like that, your nice crap, sharpen it or get a better one. To sharpen a knife, don't bother with your steels, knife steels, all of that stuff. I find they're a bit rubbish. I find it difficult to get a decent edge, so what I use is a good old-fashioned slipstone, which is used for sharpening chisels and planes and things, but they just do it better. So now we can see that that's bubbling away nicely now. Lots of steam coming off, and you can tell, give those a poke carefully. Yeah, that's softening up quite nicely. So there's some bite to the aubergine still, but it's not far off cooked really, so I need to sort of crack on and get the rest of the ingredients in. So there's, I've got my garlic, I've got the browning of the onion, and now I've got these herbs going in. That's my flavours primarily. Now, sun-dried tomatoes, more flavour punch. Most recipe books will say, oh, put a piece in about like that. Sod that. Put in some flavour. You know, so I've got a big old handful of dried tomatoes. Have a taste to see what it's like. It's tough, it's hard to bite, but as soon as you bite it, it's got a lovely, twangy, sweet, beautiful flavour to it. So again, like chopping the herbs, hold one end down, lever the rest of the knife, and that, it depends on how you like it. If you want just a background flavour adding to the whole dish, chop it small. If you want to occasionally get a lovely bit of sun-dried tomato that just goes, there you go, have some of that, then chop it about like that. That will give sort of moments of, oh, that bit's nice, to your whole dish. In those go, stir them in. Now the reason I've put them in at this stage is so that the flavour spreads through the whole dish, and that's the principle with garlic. You put that in early so that the garlic forms a background to the flavours. But I put the tomatoes in late-ish really, because I don't want them to just form background. I want that variation in flavour in each mouthful. Next up, I'm going to chop up my tomatoes. So I just want to make those sort of diced. So these are my small plum tomatoes. Those taste sweet, so those are really nice, and they just go straight in the dish like that. My knife's gone blunt. So quick sharpen up, rest it so that it's slightly angled, Give it a rub. Oops. Get that out of the way again. Make sure you rinse off the grit. Otherwise, it's not very nice. There you go, much sharper with just that much of dressing of the knife. But that's because I sharpen it frequently. Now, tomatoes, the big ones, have a core in them. Some people don't mind chewing those up, but if you're picky, here's how to get those out nice and simply. Put the knife in at an angle next to the plug. Now I have one sort of half of the tomato that doesn't have a plug in it, but it is in that half. So then I can take out that plug like so, and now that nasty bit isn't going to, add texture you might not want. Slice that up. In it goes. Again, always guiding the knife with this handshake. And I'm using my nose the whole time here. I can smell that the bottom of the pan is slightly overcooking. So again, I give it a stir. And at this point, I've just remembered that I didn't put my pepper in yet. So, lots of pepper. And I'm putting this in, and show you the texture of the pepper. It grinds to that sort of size of lumps. My pepper pot's fancy. It's got a dialable lump size, so I like that. And I like little bits where you bite in and you, oh, that's a peppery bit. So here's how much I put in. I do that many twists, which is about 8, I think, twists of the pepper pot. In it goes. And that will again form background flavour. The lentils are starting to dry out again, so I'm going to test those for cookedness. Those are soft and I like it. Yeah, you hear that? I let the pan burn dry, which is not ideal, but it does add, again, a slight smoky flavour. Oh, not quite smoky, but it adds a sort of background flavour which actually I quite like. I know it's wrong, but I like it. Lid back on those. I've turned the heat off on those. Those are cooked and they'll just be added to this pot in a minute. Carry on with the prep of my tomatoes. I forgot to do the one-sided plug then. So, dicing those, in they go, and again their moisture helps things to not stick to the bottom of the pan. One side of the plug, cut in to remove the plug. And the thing with this is, the better the knife, the more fun it is really to do all of this. If you're having to push through tomatoes, it's grim. So those are in, stir it around, and what I'm looking for is not too much moisture in the pan, but I do want it moist. So there's no pool of liquid at the bottom. If you have liquid at the bottom of the pan at this stage, it just saps all the flavour out and it just is piddly and naff. So I'm keeping the temperature low so it doesn't burn and just allowing that to simmer. Courgettes, cut the spiky bit off. You can see, are they in the same family as aubergines? I don't know. Anyway, and I get rid of the woody bit at the other end. I don't know why that bit always makes my eyes water. Anyway, slice it lengthways, so being very careful with the knife here, but slice it lengthways and then just making crescents. Those cook really fast. so they don't need to go in just yet. And you know, if you waste your time on making sure every slice is the same width, you need to get a life. Those go in a bit. Fennel. Trim off the dried out bits at the end, unless you've just got it out of the garden. Trim off the dried out bottom. And what I do with fennel for this dish is I look at the sort of bite size I want. I want lumps probably about half the thickness of this, so I'm going to cut it lengthways. These stalky bits can be a bit tough, so I slice those fairly finely. And once I get to this bit, I like a bit of bite, a bit of texture, something to go at. And as you slice this, it just smells pretty. The root of this has big lumps, so I make sure that as I get to that end of things, I start cutting it smaller again, so that those little slices like that can cook through nicely. So I'll finish that. I'm just adding it as I go. And you can see that my pan is filling up nicely, and we're maybe, I don't know, 10 minutes or so away from cooked. So I'll slice this up, and then I'll just put the lid back on, let it cook until the bits of fennel soften a bit. I've just taken that out because it's too big a hard lump. Right, pause. All my ingredients are in the pan, and what I love about this is there is colour. There's some red, there's greens, and the dark, you know, colour. Colour means nutrients. That's why plants make it colourful, so that you're attracted to eating it. That's the fruits, that is. So, lid on, leave it for maybe 5 minutes, and I'll come back and check it. Okay, while I was just letting that cook, I've just had a little taste, and I've decided that's still a bit boring flavour wise. I want more punch. Best way to do that, a little more pepper, and yes, I once saw Gordon Ramsay have a complete meltdown on TV about things he hates, and one of them was people putting salt and pepper in at the end, which is great. Love him for that. So I'm putting in more tomato, sun-dried, and I'm going to go for a bit more sage, because what I'm doing is I give the pan a sniff, and then I sniff the ingredient and I decide if those go well together, and I think so, and I think that will work nicely, so I'm just slicing up some more of that, and to hell with it, let's have the whole lot. So quite a lot more herb, because there's no meat and there's no butter and there's no salt to give it flavour, because salt has no nutrients. Butter, well, it's going to gradually clog your brain up, so, you know, bad news, brain and heart, gives you strokes, all of that sort of thing, and is not very nice to the cows. And I'm going to go for a little more of my cider vinegar, again, completely wrong for a ratatouille. a bit more of that. And I said no salt. I lied. This is soy sauce. Well, it's not soy sauce. It's yeah, tamari is the word. It's tamari. I've forgotten what the word is. So just literally just over a teaspoon of tamari, just for saltiness. Tamari is different from soy sauce in that it doesn't contain gluten. Gluten is so prevalent in our diet that it causes an erosion of the gut lining, gives you a leaky gut, so toxins in your food can go straight into your bloodstream and help to make you poorly. So now, that's sort of soft but not, it's still got some bite to it, so that's about right for me. So now you can see that my lentils, there's practically no liquid in those. It's all boiled off or been absorbed by the lentils. Throw those into, I'm just turning that way because I don't want you to see how much burn there was on the bottom of the pan, but it's actually got quite a sweet aroma. Slightly overdone it this time though. My kids will tell you that everything was always slightly burnt. Maybe that's why I've got a bit of the touch of the cancer. Okay, there we go. That's my dish. So what I'm going to do now is just let those flavours integrate a little. I've turned the heat off, lid back on. I'm going to plate it up and serve it with, these are fresh from the garden, beautiful leaves. Raw food always going to have twice as much goodness as cooked food, so this probably has as much nutrition in it as all of that. There is protein in here. So notice that's for 2 people to go as an accompaniment to 2 roast potatoes, jacket potatoes, and a big load of ratatouille. So it's quite a bit of leaf. If I were not having loads of veg in that dish and lots of other food, I'd have that much to myself. So I'm going to plate it up. Okay, here are my plates with 2 jacket potatoes each. Now that's a lot of food. The reason that you need a lot of food is because this is not calorie dense food, it's nutrient dense. So you've got lots of nutrients in this food, but it isn't like meat or dairy, this kind of bomb of calories, so you need to eat quite a lot of it. And a nice big ladle of ratatouille on this one. I've just put it straight on top, I don't know. That's whether I want it or not. You might want it at the side. Now what you'll see is that this food is not swimming in grease or butter, spoiling your sense of taste. You can actually taste all of the ingredients as separate entities with this, and just because I feel like it, a little bit of pepper over the top. Leaves. No need for anything else with that really. I think that's sorted. Time to eat. Trot.